Hello, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to the IATA webinar, which is part of our Passenger Restart series. My name is Anish, and I will be your host for today for the next 1 hour or so. So thank you very much once again for taking out the time to listen to us. We have hopefully for you a very good lineup of speakers and use cases. So once again, welcome. And my name is, as I said, it's Anish, and I'm the Assistant Director looking after the TIMATIC product in IATA. During the webinar, just to make your way from a logistics standpoint, your microphone will be muted. However, we would welcome any questions that you have. Please use the Q&A panel, and also you have a chat function on your screens as well. We are recording the webinar because we have quite a few people who are in a different time zone, and we will be posting this webinar on our iata.org web pages. Just to share with you, we have coming on to around 1,000 participants and increasing as I'm speaking. It's quite exciting watching the number of participants. It's like watching the stock market with the prices going up. Okay. Very important from a competition law perspective. We have a very diverse group of people, and this webinar is being conducted in full compliance with our antitrust and competition law guidelines. I am going to leave this slide over here for you to read and familiarize, but the key points are that any discussions that are going outside and moving on to commercially sensitive topics, we will be stopping that. And also any questions that are coming to us, we will be filtering them to make sure that there's no bilateral commercial discussions happening. We have had the agenda vetted from our legal authorities, our legal department, and there isn't anything of concern at the moment. So with that, let's kick off, and we want to hear from you. So who are you? You'll see a poll come up on your screens in a minute, and if you could just take 10-15 seconds, please tell us which organization you are coming from, and you see the answers over there. So you have around 15 minutes just to give us your feedback, and we'll share the results in a minute straight after this. Okay. So I think we should be able to get some answers back now. Let's see if the magic works.
There are still a few people answering the questions.
Okay, fair enough. So we will
go on. We will stop in about 10 seconds.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. Very interesting. So it's a very diverse group. Very interesting to see that it's a predominantly or large number from the travel agency network. Others is a big part, so we'll be keen to know what the others constitute, but we'll find that out as we go through. So thank you once again for that. We have another question for you, and it's two other questions, and once again we would welcome your answers to that. So the next question is, did you check your travel regulations as part of your personal travel or even professional travel prior to COVID? I think the question is more, of course you checked, but how diligent were you in checking the travel regulations? Did you check them thoroughly, or was it more of, yes, I've done something? So did you check the travel regulations prior to COVID? So once again, you have 15 seconds. Okay, so very diligent bunch. Yes, you have all been diligently checking. Now we'll have the question another way. Post-COVID, I hope, I wish this comes true that it's post-COVID, but now, while we are in these very unusual circumstances, how much are you checking the travel regulations in this particular period? Okay, Greg, are we ready with the answer? Oh, okay. That's a very big contrast from what we saw in the first answer. I'm still surprised that there's some who are not checking, but that's fine. But I think this kind of reinforces the message on the age we are living in now. The travel regulations and your ability to go to certain countries is quite critical. And this forms part of what you will be hearing from the speakers from IATA. And of course, we're very glad to have speakers and participants from Singapore Airlines and from Westjet. So more on those from those speakers in a minute. Question which is quite critical and is what is TIMATIC? So TIMATIC, if you look at it, and once we move on to the next set of slides, and this is where technology works quite well. TIMATIC is predominantly a travel and regulations system. So, as you can see eventually in the next slide, we know that as passengers are traveling from A to B, they need to have their travel requirements validated. What TIMATIC does, it provides that capability. We have a vast amount of passport, visa, health, customs, currency, airport tax requirements. We check for all nationalities, for all destinations, and all transit points to make sure that you as a passenger, when you are going from A to B direct or via another point, that you do have the requirements to get you into your destination country quite successfully. During the panel discussions, you will hear more on how we do it. But just to kind of set the scene on a bit more on TIMATIC, this isn't a product which we just developed because as a response to COVID. TIMATIC has been around since 1963. So if you go on to the next, if you see on the next slide, TIMATIC was launched first as a book, as a physical publication. We still print those books and many thousands of copies a month. However, we have morphed and moved over onto more electronic versions, more B2B type of a product. We validated 700 million passengers last year. Numbers are growing. Unfortunately, this year it's going to be a bit less because of the situation we are in. But we have more than 50% of large airlines around the globe relying and using TIMATIC. So the way it works is it's a mission critical product. It forms part of your operation. So when you're doing a check-in process through, can pick up any airline name, the itinerary is sent together with some components of the passenger's information is sent over to TIMATIC. We then validate if this is sufficient enough for the customer to continue, and this response is given back to the airlines for the check-in process to continue. So it's a mission critical product, and we have multiple products in the TIMATIC portfolio to cater for all different parts of the customer journey. So that's just a little bit of a snapshot on what TIMATIC is. I am not doing it justice by any stretch of imagination, but just to give you a bit of a glimpse, we have data from all around the world. We have products that cater for multiple parts of the journey. We know how mission critical it is. So we do pay a lot of attention on what we do. This moves very nicely onto the next part of the session. So I'm going to introduce the first mini panel discussion. Data is key. I'm going to hand it over to Beata and Darning, who are from the TIMATIC team, and who will walk us through for the next 10 or 15 minutes on this particular topic. Beata, over to you.
Thank you, Anish. Hello, everyone. My name is Beata, and together with my colleague Dunning, we are going to share with you how TIMATIC ensures the quality and the reliability of the data. Let's move on to the next slide to see more information. So as we know, the COVID-19 crisis is still ongoing, but as various countries are reopening their borders, the aviation stakeholders want to ensure, of course, that they have access to the latest travel regulations for the passengers. So you may be wondering, where do you obtain all this information? Well, I'm sure you have come across many news articles, many websites, and there are also social media posts related to COVID-19. And indeed, in the digital era, the news is spreading in the speed of a lightning, but does it mean all this information you come across in the media is trustworthy? Does it mean you can rely on it? Also, does it mean airlines should be, for example, boarding passengers based on the information they can find on embassy websites? And also, can passengers trust the information that they can find on social media? So the answer is no. And let me explain now, what exactly are we doing to ensure that the TIMATIC solutions are the reliable source of information for the travel regulations? Next slide, please. So, as I have mentioned in the previous slide, there is an abundance of information related to COVID, but it's not always trustworthy. So, what differentiates TIMATIC from other sources of information is the accurate data. So, how do we stay up to date with all the constant changes in the travel requirements? Well, first of all, one of the reasons why the TIMATIC data is reliable is our vast network of sources around the world. We have over 1,700 official sources. These are our contacts in more than 220 countries, and we are liaising with them on a daily basis. Within the TIMATIC team, we also have the dedicated sourcing team. This is the team which is responsible for developing relationships with the new sources and also for maintaining the relations with the existing sources worldwide, because of course we have to ensure that the advice that we provide to TIMATIC users is as accurate as possible. The sourcing team is also putting a lot of effort into working with governments, influencing them to send us information proactively, so that whenever a country updates the entry requirements, we receive that information in advance. It's very, very important that we receive the new information as early as possible so that all TIMATIC users can benefit from that. So as you can see in this slide, we have a wide array of sources. They range from government agencies, ministries, to airline station managers, and also the local offices of IATA. And we are also working closely with the European Commission, ICAO, and the World Health Organization. So to summarize this slide, we can say that the ultimate goal of the TIMATIC sourcing network are all the benefits for the parties who are involved in the passenger document compliance process. And those parties could be customs, could be immigration, health authorities, hundreds of airlines, airports, and of course, millions of passengers globally. Moving on to the next slide, please. So I have just spoken about our sourcing network, But obviously, obtaining the information is not enough. This is just the first step in our publishing process. The publishing is performed by the editing team within the thematic team. This is the team who is responsible for the content of the thematic database. In terms of the content quality, we do not simply copy and paste the laws and regulations from official sources, from official documents or websites. Every day, the team is liaising with the sources, which I was referring to in the previous slide, to clarify the new regulations. And whenever we obtain the information, we review it from different perspectives. So there's the whole analysis process that is taking place here, and this is a very important step. Each and every time, we need to assess the trustworthiness, the accuracy, and also the scope of the information that we are receiving. Now, during this process, we constantly liaise with the sources, and we have seen many times that sometimes countries have been changing entry restrictions even several times per day during the COVID outbreak. So basically, this information keeps coming all the time, and we have to keep verifying any discrepancies, any unclear or incomplete information. Now, we, of course, need to be absolutely sure that what we are going to publish is reliable, and the assessment and the validation are the two key steps in our quality assurance. We are also communicating with our sources in more than 12 different languages, so this helps us to ensure that the data indeed is accurate as possible. And once we have established what information can be published, before publishing, the data is also tested from technical perspective to make sure that different thematic products return the correct responses. All the data comes from one database. That one large database feeds all the different thematic products, so it does not matter which product you are using. During COVID-19, we have also come across many cases where information on official websites, embassy websites, social media was either not entirely true, sometimes incomplete, maybe not clear. So now let's just imagine if the thematic team would not verify the information, this would have a negative impact on airlines. It would have a huge impact on the passenger travel experience. And of course, let's not forget the countries who would be impacted as tourist or business destinations. So now to put things into perspective, we are going to share with you some real life cases. My colleague Dunning will be talking about a few examples which show the importance of having access to the correct data. As we have said in the beginning, data quality is key. Over to you, Dunning, and next slide, please.
Thank you, Beata. Indeed, we have prepared a few use cases about various countries to show the importance of validating the travel regulations before publishing. So let's first get started with the first example, Greece. We received an official document which said that nationals of 13 countries, including Australia, Canada, and Japan, can travel to Greece. When we first received this information, we had doubt because we knew that there was an official document from the European Council in June that recommended EU countries to allow entry to residents of certain countries, not nationals. So with the doubt, we went to validate with the sources, and it turned out that both nationals and residents of those 13 countries can travel to Greece. Imagine if we had just reacted to the information from the official document, the residents of those countries would not be able to travel to Greece. And it would also have impact on the bookings for the airlines. Let's look at the next case, please. Here we have a similar case for South Korea, where the information we received contradicted what the sources finally confirmed. And also imagine if we had just reacted to this information, and those passengers mentioned here would not be able to transit via South Korea in any scenario. And let's move to the next case, Bahamas. So there was some information on the government website that said from 23rd of July, only flights from Canada, EU countries, and United Kingdom will be permitted to fly to Bahamas. When we received, first, let me introduce some background information about Bahamas. So currently, there are no entry restrictions or flight suspensions in Bahamas. And it was also the same at the time when we received this information from the government website. So when we received this information, we had doubt, and then we went to the source to validate, who confirmed that all flights will still be allowed to go to Bahamas from 23rd of July. That's to say, business as usual. Also imagine if we just publish the information from the government website, airlines would unnecessarily adjust or even stop their flight operations. And also, it's worth mentioning that this could also kill the local tourism in Bahamas. And now we're going to look at the next case, Spain. We were approached by a user who was informed by the Embassy of Spain in the USA that nationals of EU countries, Schengen countries, and also British nationals can travel to Spain when they are flying from the USA. When we received this information, we analyzed it, and we realized that this is not in line with the entry restrictions we are aware of for Spain. So with doubt, we went to the source to validate, and they confirmed that the information in TIMATIC is still up to date. That means those nationals cannot travel to Spain when they are flying from the USA, with the exception for Spanish nationals. And now let's look at the last case here. Next slide, please. And we have Cameroon here. So we received an email from a TIMATIC user that said the Embassy of Cameroon in the USA is issuing visas to nationals of USA. Also, let me first introduce some background information here about Cameroon. So before we received this email, our sources already confirmed that only nationals and residents of Cameroon can travel to Cameroon. However, what the embassy is doing here would prompt people to think that nationals of the USA can also go to Cameroon. And therefore, it could give a false impression that some information is missing in TIMATIC. So with question marks about this information, we went to validate with the source, and they confirmed again that TIMATIC is up to date. That means nationals of USA cannot enter Cameroon. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Danning, for sharing the examples. So as we have just heard, every day the TIMATIC team receives information from everywhere, but in each case, we have to perform the analysis and of course, verify the travel regulations. Now, Danning, let's briefly look into the impact of not verifying the information. What impact could it have, Danning?
Yeah, indeed. Thank you, Beata. Incorrect data can have serious consequences. So I would like to talk about the impact of incorrect data from two perspectives, airlines and passengers. Let's first get started with airlines. First of all, they could wrongly reject passengers who should have been able to travel to the destination. For example, the use cases we just shared, Greece and Korea. But on the other hand, they could also wrongly accept passengers who shouldn't have been able to travel. For example, the cases Spain and Cameroon. And in that case, if they have wrongly accepted passengers who shouldn't have been able to travel, that can result in immigration fines, which was of course not an ideal situation. And the next one is when the travel of passengers is disrupted, of course, passengers will tend to have negative travel experience, which can result in low customer satisfaction. Meanwhile, when passengers see the information, they think that, oh, I cannot travel to the destination. Then they are not likely to book the ticket with the airline, which means less bookings and also less revenue for the airlines. As we all know, during this COVID-19 crisis, every passenger counts for the airlines. Last but not least, there are costs involved in rescheduling flights and rebooking passengers for the airlines as well. And next, let's take a look at the passenger side. Of course, there could be confusion at the check-in counter because they booked a ticket with the information and then they show up at the check-in counter and then they are told that, no, you are not allowed to go. There could be confusion at the check-in counter, even conflicts, and which can slow down the check-in process of the airlines as well. And next, when passengers are not treated in a correct way, they will feel unhappy with the airline, which makes them less likely to travel again with the airline. And of course, there are also costs in rearranging the journey for the for the passengers as well. To sum up, we have looked at various use cases that TIMATIC editing team is experiencing on a daily basis. They clearly show the importance of data validation, which helps ensure that the data in TIMATIC stay up to date and accurate. And that's all for the use cases from my side. I'd like to hand it back over to Anish. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Beata and Dunning. So you've heard quite a bit on the data side of things and the accuracy for the data. By the way, we are getting many questions coming our way, but in interest of time and the flow of the webinar, we will get to your questions towards the end of the webinar. I'd like to hand it over to Maren and to John to take us through the next mini panel discussion. Maren, over to you.
Thank you, Anish. Hello, everyone. I want to cover a couple of things, what the TIMATIC team did, and I would like to ask John as well to give some insights how Westjet handled everything during the crisis. So if we can see on the next slide, the TIMATIC team adapted very quickly and early, of course, to the COVID-19 situation. So just to give you an idea, on a daily basis, we approximately did like 60 to 70 updates in our database on a daily basis. During COVID, it went up to 100 to 200, as you can imagine. And as Beata said, sometimes countries changed more than once the regulations during the day. We even further added more content so that we can provide you and especially our users with more details. Like Dunning also explained, if flights were suspended or completely closed, the same applies for airports. And then, of course, what was introduced, the quarantine regulations. The team tried to extend even the coverage to be on top of things. And we covered 4 time zones during the crisis, and we still do. Just to give you a quick update, we did around 15,000 updates compared to last year. The other thing what we provided, and you can see this on the next slide, was we tried to help the public as well, not only our TIMATIC users, how to receive information. And at that time, we decided to quickly display the information which we have in our TIMATIC database and show it on our public website, which is called IATA Travel Center. I'm sure a lot of you using this at the moment to receive the information. And it's, of course, free service, but please use it for personal use. And as Beata and Dunning explained in several cases, we only update these information when verified. So we also would like to point out at this time that if you use the travel center, please check with your airline as well, because we don't know the itinerary, meaning which routing you're flying. We don't know which documents we're flying. So please use this as a guideline, but just to make sure, please check with your airline before you're boarding. And talking about airlines, I would like to introduce John from Westjet, who will tell us a little bit about how Westjet was coping during COVID. So John, thanks again for joining from Canada at this early hour for you. Could you please probably start and briefly explain the overview of Westjet and especially the development of the last year?
Perfect. Thank you, Maren, and thank you everybody for joining the call today. Again, I'll provide just a brief overview about the Westjet and then provide some additional information regarding how TIMATIC has been assisting Westjet during the COVID-19 pandemic and the tools that we're making use to keeping our guests well informed of all the daily changes to entrance requirements to destinations. So as you can see on the slide above you, Westjet is a relatively new airline and just launched back in 1996 as a low-cost domestic carrier serving 5 points in Western Canada, and was able to attract many Canadians to travel for the first time by air with very low-cost flights, like $49 between Calgary and Vancouver. That model worked very well for us and allowed us to grow for the first 10 years to serve many points in Canada and then finally start to look to expand first with flights into the United States. As we grew successfully, oh, sorry, I'll just go back, Gregory, one slide. Yeah, so just as we grew well on that in 2005, in the last few years, our focus has really changed from becoming a low-cost point-to-point carrier to look at becoming a full commercial network air carrier. So we've brought on regional carriers in Canada to like Westjet Encore and Westjet Link to serve even smaller communities and bring Canadians to our hub points in Vancouver, Calgary, and Toronto, and then begin to feed into our 787 expansion. So next slide. Great. Okay. Yeah. So again, relatively new to the whole world of serving international travels around the world. So in 2018, Westjet took delivery of a 787 aircraft. We're up to 6 aircraft now and plan to grow to 10 aircraft by the end of next year. And we're serving points in Dublin, London Gatwick, Paris, Barcelona, and actually plan to continue a rapid expansion of international destinations like Rome this summer and other destinations beyond. But this global pandemic has really had an impact on the travel demands of where people are wishing to travel to. So it really has become a rethinking of what the plans are going forward. Next slide. So for Westjet, now that we're in the international market, we've actually grown our partnerships and relationship with air carriers around the world. So we have over 50 co-chair and interline partners, and we are now seeing Canadian guests getting on a Westjet flight in, say, Lethbridge, Alberta, and traveling to many destinations around the world. So somebody in Lethbridge can board a Westjet flight and connect to our partner KLM and get into Kuala Lumpur. So the requirements to check the entry requirements in TIMATIC has become far more complicated and far more important.
Thank you, John. So Westjet grew from a local carrier to a global carrier. So I would like to ask you, and maybe you can explain us briefly as well, what are the requirements for Westjet using TIMATIC at this stage?
Right. Thank you, Mary. Okay, next slide. So as I'm sure everybody can appreciate, when Westjet launched, most of our agents never had to look at the guest's passports or even understood what a visa might inquire. So we have a lot of inexperienced agents that had to be spooled up on entrance requirements when checking documents. And as we grew exponentially, so did our fines for transporting improperly documented passengers around the world. So we really needed to rethink our focus of just having our agents trained on how to read the TIMATIC in front of them when the guest arrived and make the right call, to really look at finding ways to educate our guests prior to travel and seek tools that TIMATIC offered to allow our guests to actually check the requirements before travel. And as indicated, more complicated routings also required new tools and new ways of understanding what transit rules were, transit visas are, and so we've been really relying on the TIMATIC editing team to help us understand all the changes that are occurring.
Thank you, John. And can you give us a brief overview as well, like how is Westjet using TIMATIC today? How do you inform your passengers, for example?
Sure. Okay. Next slide. Yeah. So as I touched on, obviously our reservation and check-in agents actually have the ability to pull up TIMATIC at time of check-in and read through the the entrance requirements as far as passport validity. We do see a lot of Canadians unaware that they have to have their passport valid for beyond 6 months of entrance and things like that. So we're putting a focus on that. But as I indicated, we really wanted to find tools that TIMATIC offered to educate our guests prior to travel to make sure that they had the required travel documents. So one of the things that we were able to use TIMATIC for is their co-branded TIMATIC Web 2 website. So we've been able to create a Westjet link to a TIMATIC 2 site that we're actually emailing our guests prior to travel and informing them that they should, they have an international booking with Westjet and they should double check the entrance requirement. So it's a very handy tool. It allows the guests to enter their routing, their passport details and visa information, and TIMATIC provides a very simple to read thumbs up that yes, everything you have is in order and you'll have no issues with your travel, or provide some conditional responses and make them aware of things that they need to rectify before they travel. We're also making use of IATA's TIMATIC auto check tool, which allows us to have our guests use our self-serve check-in applications via web, mobile, or kiosk to enter their passport details. And before we issue them a boarding pass, it does a call out to TIMATIC to check the routing, check the validity of their passports and documents, and then confirm they have the required documents for travel, and then allows them to proceed for check-in. If they don't have the required documents, the note is displayed to go see an agent, and TIMATIC responses put onto the reservation. So when the guest arrives at the airport, the agent can read the note from TIMATIC and inform the guest the particular requirements they need if to allow travel.
Thank you, John, for explaining this. That was very useful to hear. But of course, the question is like, during these challenging times, how is Westjet coping with the COVID-19 pandemic?
Exactly. Next slide. So I think we've touched on that, as Marion, you've touched on that. Since the pandemic started, the global entries have been changing quite dramatically. So for Westjet, we found that a lot of countries began imposing new health requirements, quarantines, regulations as well. And it really dramatically impacted the passenger travel demand. So as in February, as countries were making these changes, we had to have our TIMATIC auto check program understanding the changes and put in deviations because it became far more important to not only just focus on passports and visas in this environment, but also making sure that we're understanding each country's health requirements as they imposed, or if they closed the airport. So we started to notice a lot of our TIMATIC auto check responses. We were getting no board responses, and we needed to double check and verify if it was a correct reason for denying travel or if it was just a warning. So we worked with the TIMATIC editing team on that. And that was in February. But as I said, as travel bans and quarantines came into place, and a lot of that impacted the travel demand globally. So in March, Westjet actually suspended all our international flying because there was just a lack of demand, and we really focused our efforts on repatriating Canadians, so doing repatriation flights for the government of Canada to bring Canadians home during this pandemic. So that we're now in an area of July that we actually have started to trial the services into the United States, into Cancun, Mexico, and it really has changed the focus of, once we used to file schedules every 6 months and knew where we were going to fly 6 months from now, to these ever-changing day-by-day entrance requirements to actually determine where we're going to fly the next 30 days. and then go out and try to see if there's a demand and continue flying. So it's being evaluated on like a 30-day window right now. And then, so we did US and Mexico in July, and this month we're now restarting services into Jamaica, France, and the UK, and starting to see some positive uptake in passenger demand on these routes. But as countries like the UK still put self-isolation requirements and quarantine requirements, it does have a negative impact on the abilities of travelers to travel back to new destinations.
Thanks, John. And I think everyone is really, really interested, of course, as we call it, the new normal.
Mm-hmm.
How is Westjet adjusting? Maybe you can give us a quick overview as well on this one. How are you coping with this new normal situation?
Right. Yeah. So we put up the TIMATIC analytics response. So that's another tool that Westjet is using of the TIMATIC products as the analytics. So as I said, we have the self-serve check-in applications using the auto check requirement. So this is just a window in the last 8 days. So of the top 100 destinations guests are traveling to on Westjet, so they're checking in within Canada. And we see we're still doing a lot of call out. So there still are individuals who are traveling to a wide range of destinations through our codeshare partners. But the focus is now really on not just understanding if they needed a passport or visa, but truly understand what the health requirements are and making sure that they're getting the appropriate response through our auto check programs.
Okay.
So,
I think, thanks a lot, John, because as my colleague Mahir will also cover one of the products Westjet is using, TIMATIC Alerts. Thanks a lot for all the insights, and I will hand over to Anish.
Okay. Yep. Sorry. Okay.
All right. So thanks, John, so much, and thank you, Maren. And you articulated quite clearly, John, that the green shoots are appearing, and good to see that TIMATIC is helping Westjet in some ways to get your passengers and your operations back to normal. We're moving on to the last part of our panel, and it's on a specific product that we had created in response to COVID. I'll hand it over to Mahir and our colleagues from Singapore Airlines. Once we finish with this, then we will start getting to your questions, which I see there's many coming our way. Mahir, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Anish, and hello, everyone. This is Mahir. I'm one of the product managers for TIMATIC, and I'm here joined by Singapore Airlines team, Huai Dai as the Vice President of the Digital Division, and Rick Chang, whom we have been working very closely in the recent couple of months as a Principal Technologist in the Digital Division, and finally, Vayan Chan as the Assistant Manager in Ground Experience. So in this session, we'll be talking about how TIMATIC adopted a few changes based on the needs of the industry, and of course, how we came up with the products. And with this, while we're talking about this, we'll also basically having an interacting session that will explain how we have collaborated with Singapore Airlines during this time. Of course, to get to that point, we need to establish the basis first. So as my colleagues already mentioned, TIMATIC has been used by airlines, ground handlers, online travel agencies, airports, government bodies, and countless travel agencies to ensure passenger travel document compliance. And the use cases with all of our actually members so far have been mostly around passenger check-in through different channels, back offices, and booking, but we have been already seeing a trend towards creating more awareness with passengers and moving all of these checks towards the outside of the airport. But with COVID-19, we have seen this trend fast-tracked, as you can imagine, and there was a need for more for the from the whole industry. Greg, if you can move on to the next slide, please. So we have seen requests coming in from all of our members and non-members as well So we have seen the need for informing travelers, and not only informing travelers, because TIMATIC was already actually providing solutions to that, but informing them based on the dynamic changes every day. And of course, informing the operational teams who interact with these passengers or travelers on a daily basis, because they have to stay on top of the changes. And many other organizations had to be on top of what these regulations are in order to determine how and when their staff can travel. Not only that, we have seen airlines actually struggle with keeping up with the regulations in terms of how it is different for passengers versus crew. Because if you were to fly to some country, your crew is not actually treated the same way as the passengers. So what were the differences? And finally, of course, in order to help with the restart, how do you plan your routes? Because all of the borders were closed at some point, and now they're opening up, like John actually mentioned quite a bit. But before moving forward, I want to ask this question back to Singapore Airlines. How you've been using TIMATIC for almost all these use cases that we have mentioned, but we've seen that there was a need for more. Can you tell us about what was your main pain points with the COVID-19 crisis?
Hi, Mahir. Yeah, thank you. I guess the main pain points because of the COVID-19 is the information is changing so fast, right? I think as I mentioned earlier, some of the governments are changing their rules, regulations a few times a day. So it's really important, how can we be proactive to inform our customers about these changes? I think that would be the main challenge, I would say, that we want to tackle.
And of course, I understand that also as there was a need for the need for an understanding change as well, because passengers were to question what needs to be done or what they need to have in order to travel. But now with these dynamic changes, the system has to be different. Like you have to trigger and inform them proactively. Am I right to understand that?
Yeah, you're right. So yeah, we have to then look at the whole customer journey from pre-booking to booking to after booking, before travel, during day of the travel. The information might be changing, and we need to really be able to inform our customer what is the latest situation and what is the latest information and travel restrictions, so that they're all prepared and ready for travel. Yeah.
All right. Thanks. How are you? Greg, can we move over to the next slide? So we have actually been in contact with Singapore Airlines on all of this. So we had this conversation several times with Andrik and Hao-Yu. But of course, it wasn't only Singapore Airlines. We have received several requests from all of our members, and all of these basically needs were revolved around a couple of points. And one of them was unable to keep track of the changes, because yes, TIMATIC informs in terms of the latest regulation, but also there was a need for being informed about what changed. And of course, the regulations with COVID-19, even though it started simple, like close all borders, now with the restart, we see that the regulation complexity is incredible, because you can, for example, just we are based in Netherlands, so with, for example, the Sweetheart program. So the regulations could not have been just granular as the level that we wanted to have. And of course, finally, just like what we talked about with Hao-Yu, there was a need for triggering the communication with the customer, with the passenger, to be proactive. Next slide, please. So based on all of this feedback, we've tuned our solutions towards the need of the industry. So we were already the most reliable database around the world for all travel regulations. But when it comes to the very dynamic changes of COVID-19 restrictions, we thought it was essential for us to move towards a push notification solution to address these needs. So what we have done is basically continued. So we adopted a few changes in terms of how we source our information, and my colleagues already talked about that. And we pushed the news to IATA Travel Center to help even direct it to the passengers. So from a B2C perspective, any traveler could go online on IATA Travel Center and get the information themselves. Plus, we started applying some granularity. So we started applying some context. We not only provided the latest update, we started providing updates on what changed. So contextual awareness was also important, and we started sending out push notifications. Next slide, please. So one of the most important things, we came out with thematic alerts in a very quick time frame to help the industry get ready for the restart. So as I mentioned, we applied the granularity to the regulations. We made it machine readable, so it was possible to incorporate the information to any existing solutions in the industry. We made it push notifications to help with the dynamic changes. If we move on to the next slide. So thematic alerts, you can see a very quick sample of the different information that thematic alerts provide. It is the granularity that you see. So you get information in terms of whether there is a quarantine at your destination, whether it is the regulations only apply to entry regulations or transit. Is it only for basically foreigners, or does it also apply to residents and nationals, etc.? So there is much granularity to be found in the push notification that you receive, and it also informs about the context of the change. And we do publish this information as soon as the information is available. So there is no sort of a delay that is happening with the push notification versus how we get our information. So it is live in a sense. And one thing that I would like to mention here is that we came up with this product, and then we provide two different licenses with it. One of them is an internal license that would help any organization to use the information that is provided with thematic alerts internally within their organization. And the second one, of course, is for you to share these details with your customers and your passengers, which what we call public license. And with that, I would like to leave the word to Singapore Airlines with a question. How you, again, could you please tell us how you've resolved the pain points that you've mentioned, and how did thematic alerts help with that?
Yeah, sure, Mahir. Yeah, so as I mentioned, this is really about the customer experience in the customer journey, right? The information is changing fast and furious, and we need to make sure that our passengers get hold of the latest and accurate information, and it has to be timely. So how do we do that? So, after a round of discussions, a number of discussions with you and Anish, right, we came up with the idea that why don't we pull the information from thematic and through your push mechanism, and then build it into our different digital channels, our website, our mobile applications, our chatbot, and really to offer this information along the customer journey. Sometimes it's based on when they do a transaction on the website or mobile, or sometimes it's actually a proactive notification. So I'll let Wee An to perhaps walk through, what are the things that we have built. Wee An is our product owner for all these, features that we have built. Yeah. Next slide.
Hi everyone.
Yeah.
I'm Wei Yang from Singapore Airlines, and I will now briefly illustrate how we integrate the thematic travel restrictions into our passenger journey. Next slide, please. So we will be covering the pre-booking, booking, as well as the day of travel phases. Next slide, please. So during pre-booking, passengers can check their travel restrictions to any country via our website, mobile app, as well as from our chatbot, Chris. Passengers will be shown the travel restrictions based on the search destination and nationality, which is optional. Next slide, please. During booking, passengers are able to check the travel restrictions to their selected destinations via the provided link, as you can see in the slide. Right, next slide, please. So finally, nearer to the day of travel, passengers will receive some EDMs with a link to check the latest travel restrictions for their itinerary. One such EDM will be our pre-trip email. Yeah, so that's all for the integration, and I shall now hand over to my colleague Andrew, who will be sharing the technicalities behind our TIMATIC integration.
Hi, thanks, Ryan. Hi, everyone. I will now briefly take you through the technical implementation by Singapore Airlines with regards to TIMATIC travel restrictions. First of all, we got the TIMATIC database download, which contain the travel restriction for about 235 countries in a granular format, right? So we use this data, we use this data to build our base database. To ensure our database has the up-to-date travel restriction, we subscribe to TIMATIC alerts, which deliver the update for a country via email, which clearly highlight what was the change since last update. This alert really allow us to easily update our database to ensure that it is up to date. So now, how do we export the travel restriction to our passenger via the website, the mobile app, and chatbot and whatnot? We achieve this by building a content as a service API for the self-service channel to retrieve and present the information to our customer. Yeah. So as you see, the integration is pretty straightforward. I must say thanks to TIMATIC database and also TIMATIC alert that allow us to actually easily build the database and then also allow our self-service channel to actually retrieve the information and present it to our customer. Yeah, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you very much to the Singapore Airlines team. I believe you've done a marvelous job to adopt these changes into your offerings as well as to meet the demands of the passengers. So finally, I would like to ask another question to how are you? Could you finally talk about the results a bit? So did you see any benefits? So how was the reaction from the passengers?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I think we started talking about this, I think about 2 months ago, if you recall. And then we spent about 8 weeks, 7 to 8 weeks to actually to do this delivery. And we launched this about a week ago, right? So since the launch, we are seeing a couple of thousand requests every day on these services, in a sense of being exposed to our individual customers, whether it's a part of the booking or whether it's an EDM or whether it's a website, web form request. So I think it shows that there is a keen interest of our customers wanting to know this information because it's important. They need to know whether they can or cannot fly to a destination, and if they can, what are the requirements? Yeah. So
yeah, thank you very much. And it sounds like you're on the right track. Another question that came to mind was when you're informing the passengers with the information that you get from IATA, how do you feel about the reliability of the information? Because I have also seen a lot of questions about the reliability of the information that you get from us. Do you see the trust from the passengers when the information is branded with IATA?
Of course, I mean that is really the key reason, right? So you can have a very good flow and interface, personalized in the customer travel journey, but the accuracy and the reliability of this information is paramount. If it is not accurate, then it is useless. Yeah. So having this information coming from IATA and TIMATIC, which has been serving the industry for years, I think it is really, in a sense, the official information, a place where you can really get of all the information from different countries or different nationalities, right? Just as how we have been using this at the airport, right, for the TIMATIC auto check. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much, Hao-Yu and the rest of the Singapore Airlines team. If anybody would like to get more information on TIMATIC alerts, you can go online on iata.org to the TIMATIC page and get in contact with us as well through that. So with that, we're back to you, Anish.
Great, thank you so much. We are just making it on time, typical airline industry, on-time performance, which is excellent. Unfortunately, we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. We have been answering them as they have been coming through in the panel. One of the ones which I think we really need to address is why do you see a difference between the information in TIMATIC and what is published in social media? And this goes back to what you heard at the beginning. The quality and the accuracy of the data is critical. So we do not react to what is published on social media or even on government websites, which may sound ironical because based on our experience, we need to validate the information. We need to make sure that the information is curated and we are able to stand behind the information. It's for this reason that you may see a little bit of a lag between what you hear in social media or on government websites and what you have in TIMATIC. We do take the accuracy and reliability of our data very seriously, so hence the reason why we go through some added steps very similar to what you heard in the beginning from Beata and Darling. One of the other questions that came about was from some travel agencies that does TIMATIC have a product for small travel agencies? Yes, we do. You heard from John from Westjet. He mentioned a product called TIMATIC Web 2, which is very much geared for the industry, for the smaller travel agencies. And I'll take one more question. I'm just looking through the panel. In terms of, there's a lot of questions regarding, does TIMATIC have COVID-specific information? Absolutely. This is what we did. We changed the content and the context of the information we capture in TIMATIC to speak in some very specific COVID-related items. So all of this information is available. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, and I know some of you would be running off to other calls or going to bed or making your coffees. But if you do want to get in touch with us, come up or get into touch with us on iata.org, which is on the next screen. So you can reach us on iata.org/TIMATIC. And we will be more than happy to get back to you on that. We've had more than 100 questions coming up in the Q&A session. So what we will do is that we will consolidate them and we will upload it together with the recording of this webinar. So with that, close to 1,000 participants, which is excellent considering it's holiday season in many, many parts of the world. So thank you very much for your time and your attention, and thank you very much for our panelists for their time and contribution to this. And let's hope we all can do a little bit to get our fantastic industry restarted, and look forward to catching up with you all sometime soon. So stay safe, take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and catch up sometime soon. Thank you very much.